Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Dave's Spooky Stories. I'm your host, Dave. Tonight we have a collection of spooky UFO stories. Please like and subscribe, comment below, and here's the first story. Story number 1, The Radio Tower Encounter. It was just another Tuesday when I found myself 1,500 feet above the ground, suspended in a harness and clinging to the steel skeleton of a radio tower. Changing light bulbs on these was my trade, a niche job that demanded nerves of steel and a peculiar appreciation for solitude. From up there, the world flattened out and the horizon stretched into infinity. It was peaceful, save for the constant gusts of wind that threatened to knock you off your perch if you weren't careful. The light bulbs we swapped weren't your average household kind. These were aircraft warning lights, designed to flash red and white to keep planes from colliding with the towers. Climbing up with a bulky replacement bulb strapped to my back and a toolkit dangling from my side was part endurance test, part ballet. You couldn't afford mistakes, not at this altitude. It was late afternoon, and the sun hung low, painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber. Beautiful. As I worked my way up the tower, I caught a glimpse of something unusual. A glimmer in the sky, faint at first. I chalked it up to sunlight reflecting off a passing plane or maybe a drone someone was flying nearby. But it wasn't long before I realized this was neither. The object grew closer, defying any patterns I'd seen in aircraft movement. It wasn't cutting through the air like a plane or hovering like a helicopter. It was gliding, smoothly, almost eerily, with no apparent propulsion. The shape became clear as it approached, a sphere, metallic, and about the size of a compact car. It reflected the sunlight in an odd way, almost like it was absorbing it and radiating a faint glow. My heart raced as I clung to the tower. The job had given me plenty of wild stories, unexpected storms, near misses with rogue birds. But this was beyond anything I could comprehend. The sphere slowed its approach and hovered maybe 300 feet away from me, almost as if it were inspecting me. I could feel my breath quicken, my grip tighten on the tower's steel frame. Was it real? Was I hallucinating? Could fatigue or the high altitude be playing tricks on me? There wasn't a sound, not a hum, not a whir. It was silent as the wind around me. The sphere's surface was smooth, unmarred by seams or markings. There were no windows, no signs of propulsion, yet it moved with precision, like it had a mind of its own. My gut told me it was no drone, no experimental aircraft. It felt alive somehow. Time seemed to freeze as I watched it hover, unsure whether to call for help or just keep quiet. I held my position, praying the harness wouldn't fail me and that this thing, whatever it was, wouldn't come closer. For a moment I swore it tilted slightly, as if acknowledging my presence, before gliding back into the distance. Within seconds it disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving me alone in the fading sunlight. I'd experienced surreal moments before, the feeling of insignificance you get while suspended in a sea of clouds, the overwhelming beauty of watching a storm roll across the plains. But this was different. It wasn't awe or wonder. It was confusion, a gnawing unease that something extraordinary had just occurred and left no explanation behind. The climb down was a blur. My hands fumbled with every rung of the tower's ladder, and my mind raced with possibilities. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but the rational part of me struggled to come up with an answer that made sense. Ball lightning? Experimental tech? A figment of my imagination? The questions piled up faster than I could process them. Back on the ground, I stood in the shadow of the tower, staring up at the sky as if it might offer a clue. But the sky was empty and indifferent, no trace of the sphere to suggest it had ever been there. I debated telling my crew, but what could I say? Hey, I saw a UFO while changing the light bulb. What's for lunch? So I opted to keep it to myself, at least for the moment. The incident stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. In the days that followed, I spent hours online, combing through forums, articles, and eyewitness accounts that resembled mine. Years have passed since that day, but the memory remains vivid. The metallic sheen, the silent movement, the feeling that I was being watched. I still don't have the answers, and maybe I never will. But every now and then, when I'm on a tower, and the wind carries a peculiar calm, I find myself scanning the horizon, wondering if it'll ever return. Story number 2, Encounter over Lake Mendota. It was late September 1992, just as Wisconsin leaves were flirting with shades of gold and crimson. I remember the air had that crispness that hinted at the incoming frost, but still felt gentle, like a fading echo of summer. Only days earlier, I'd seen the Grateful Dead live for the very first time. It was in Chicago, a blur of twirling tie-dye, pulsating rhythms, and the sort of camaraderie that can only be described as cosmic. I'd been riding high ever since, my brain replaying Jerry Garcia's riffs like they were on a loop. Even now, Madison felt different, like I tapped into some unspoken wavelength that I hadn't known existed. That night, I found myself wandering near the shores of Lake Mendota, my breath visible in the cooling air. The city seemed quieter than usual, the hum of the university dulled by some unseen force. I remember stopping on Bascom Hill, gazing at the skyline where the Capitol Dome cut through the twilight. And that's when it happened. At first I thought it was a reflection, a flicker of light in the corner of my eye. But when I turned, I saw it, hovering above the city. It was a perfect disk, metallic and gleaming, with a soft glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. For a moment I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Was this some sort of Grateful Dead flashback? Had I overdone it with the little paper squares at the concert? But as I focused on the object, I realized this wasn't my imagination. It was real. It was there. People around me began to notice it too. A couple walking their dog stopped dead in their tracks. A student with a backpack froze mid-step, pointing silently at the sky. The murmurs started small but grew louder as more heads turned upwards. "What is that?" someone whispered. "Is it a UFO?" I couldn't take my eyes off it. The object hovered silently, impossibly still, defying every law of physics I'd ever learned. My heart raced, not out of fear, but from the sheer awe of it. The glow intensified, casting an eerie light across the rooftops of State Street. For a fleeting moment I felt an overwhelming sense of connection, as if the object and I were somehow intertwined. And then, as if responding to our collective gaze, the object began to move. It tilted slightly, like it was nodding in acknowledgement, and then shot upwards with a speed that left no room for disbelief. It disappeared into the night sky, leaving behind nothing but a tiny speck that quickly faded into the stars. The whole thing lasted less than a minute, but it felt eternal, like time itself had warped. The crowd was stunned. Some people tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a drone, one guy suggested, though even he didn't sound convinced. Another joked, "This has the Onion written all over it. Bet they're staging some elaborate prank. A few folks muttered about the possibility of government experiments. But most of us just stood there in silence, bonded by an unspoken understanding that we'd witnessed something extraordinary. I walked home that night in a daze, the image of the UFO replaying in my mind like a film reel. I tried to make sense of it. Was it an illusion? A collective hallucination? Or had I really just seen something from beyond our world? Even now, all these years later, I still don't have the answers. But I do know this. That moment changed me. It made me question everything I thought I knew about reality, about the universe, about what's out there. And sometimes, late at night, when the world feels quiet and the stars seem particularly bright, I find myself looking up, wondering if I'll ever see it again. Story number 3. Encounter on a northern highway with a UAP. It was late, almost 10 o'clock, and I was heading down that long, straight highway cutting through northern Wisconsin. The air was dense with mist, clinging to the tops of the tamarack trees that lined the road like silent sentinels. Even though I'd taken this road hundreds of times before, there was something about tonight, something in the air that felt different. The road dipped and rose with the hills, disappearing into the night ahead. My headlights were the only source of light as far as I could see, flickering over cracks in the asphalt and the occasional reflector post. No other cars, no stars, just me, the open highway, and the endless forest stretching into shadows on either side. I wasn't scared. Not at first. I'd spent the weekend at a buddy's cabin, fishing, talking, enjoying the peace of the woods. I'd stayed too late, of course, and now I had a long drive ahead of me before I could crawl into bed. But I wasn't worried. I'd driven this road so many times I practically knew it by heart. At least that's what I told myself. Then I heard the sound. At first I thought it was my engine. It was faint, a low, steady hum. But it didn't match the rhythm of the truck. I rolled the window down, figuring it might be the wind or maybe something in the trees. But when I opened the window, the sound grew louder. It wasn't the wind, and it definitely wasn't coming from the truck. It was coming from somewhere behind me. I glanced at the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights from some car I hadn't noticed. Instead, I saw it. A light, far off in the distance, cresting the top of a hill. It was bluish white, very bright, and it was moving fast. Too fast for any vehicle. My chest tightened as I watched it, trying to convince myself it was just a plane or maybe some kind of a drone. But even as I told myself that, I knew better. Whatever it wasn't normal. I kept driving, trying not to look at the light. I figured it would pass me by or fade into the trees, but it didn't. The hum grew louder, vibrating under my skin like it was tunneling through my chest. The light stayed with me, cresting every hill I passed, growing closer with every mile. It wasn't just following me, it was chasing me. I pressed my foot harder on the gas, the needle on the speedometer climbing higher than I was comfortable with. The truck groaned as I took the hills faster than I should have, but I didn't care. I had to get away. I glanced in the rearview mirror again, and my stomach dropped. The light was closer now, hovering just above the treetops like some alien eye tracking my every move. The bluish glow reflected off the trees, casting unnatural shadows that seemed to dance and twist beyond the trunks. The hum was deafening now, filling the cab of my truck with a sound so loud I could barely think. I tried every trick I could think of, slowing down, speeding up, swerving across the lanes. But nothing worked. The light stayed with me, relentless and unyielding. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles white, sweat dripping down my temples. My heart pounded in my ears, and I could barely keep my thoughts straight. What was it? Why was it following me? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted, that this thing wasn't just chasing me, it was studying me. The hills smoothed out ahead, giving me a clear view of the road stretching into the horizon. That's when I saw it. The light wasn't just a light, it was part of something bigger, a craft, massive and circular, hovered above the highway, gliding silently above the trees. Lights rippled across its surface, colors I couldn't even name, shifting in patterns that seemed to defy logic. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at it, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. It followed me like a shadow, never faltering, never turning away. I pushed the truck harder, the engine screaming as I reached speeds I knew were dangerous, but it didn't matter. The craft kept pace effortlessly, its glow washing over the forest and illuminating details I'd never noticed before. The moss on the trees seemed to shimmer, the shadows between the trunks growing deeper and darker, and then I saw them. Shapes starting between the trees, shapes that weren't human. My pulse spiked as I realized they were watching me too. The hum grew sharper, almost painful, and the craft descended lower, its light now filling the truck with a blinding glow. No matter how fast I drove, no matter how many hills I climbed, it was always there. I thought about stopping, about slamming the truck into park and facing it head-on, but I couldn't. The thought of stepping out into the glow, of standing there under its gaze, was too much. I didn't want to know what would happen if I stopped. I couldn't. So I kept driving, my hands trembling, my heart racing, my mind screaming at me to keep going, no matter what. For what felt like hours, the craft followed me, its hum burrowing deeper into my skull, its light painting the world around me in eerie blues and silvers. I felt trapped like a mouse in a maze, running from something I couldn't unrun. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The hum stopped. The light vanished. And the night returned to its suffocating quiet. I was alone again. The road stretching endlessly ahead, the forest dark and still. I didn't stop to think about what had happened. I didn't stop at all. I just kept driving, my hands still shaking, my mind replaying the image of the craft hovering above me. That highway is still the only way home. I drive it almost every day, and every time I do, I wonder if tonight will be the night it comes back. Story number 4, Bill's story. The Cheatin' Heart wasn't the kind of place you went to see and be seen. It was tucked away at the edge of town, shrouded in enough mystery that you'd only know it was there if someone told you, or if you stumbled across it late at night, drawn in by the neon beer sign flickering faintly above the door. It wasn't bright. It wasn't fancy. It was a refuge, a dark oasis for anyone looking to disappear for a few hours. Inside, the dim lighting made every corner feel like it had secrets to hide. The walls were paneled in wood so dark it was almost black, absorbing the weak light from the single bulb above the bar. There were no mirrors behind the counter, just gleaming bottles catching the light, rows of liquor on plain shelves, accompanied by the comforting hum of a jukebox tucked in the far corner. The jukebox was the pride of the place. It had a scratchy sound, but it played good music. Everything from Johnny Cash to Muddy Waters to forgotten rock ballads that could pull memories out of you before you even realized it. I was nursing a beer at the bar, watching condensation beat up on the glass and run down in tiny streams. The bartender, a wiry man with tired eyes, didn't bother making small talk. He served your drink and let you be, which is exactly what I liked about the Cheatin' Heart. It was quiet, except for the occasional clink of glass and the gentle crackle of song filtering through the jukebox. A place where the outside world didn't exist. Stinky Bill was sitting 2 stools down from me. He was hunched over his ale, as usual, his weathered jacket pulled tight around his shoulders like a shield. The dim light barely touched him. leaving his face half hidden in shadow. Bill wasn't called stinky because he smelled bad, but because there was a lingering aura about him, a damp, earthy presence that followed him like a whisper from the woods. He had stories, lots of them, and most people were just too polite or too afraid to ask about them. But that night, I couldn't resist. "Evening, Bill," I said, sliding a little closer. He turned his head just enough that I could see the glint of his bloodshot eyes. "Evening," he muttered, his voice low and gravelly. He took a long sip of his ale before finally adding, "You believe in aliens?" I paused, caught off guard. I don't know. Never thought about it much," I said. "Why?" Bill's lips twisted into something between a smile and a grimace. "I saw something," he said, "out near Myers Park. You want to hear about it?" The jukebox switched tracks, the smooth notes of a blues riff filling the air. It felt like the kind of moment that demanded attention, so I nodded. "All right, Bill, tell me." He leaned back slightly, his fingers tracing the rim of his mug as though the story were waiting there, etched in the foam. "A couple weeks back," he began, "I was at the Crow's Nest, that pub by Myers Park. They had a band playing. Good music. None of that modern garbage. I had a few too many pints. Ended up staying later than I meant to. When I finally left, it was past midnight." He paused, staring at something invisible beyond the bar. The bartender glanced over, but Bill didn't notice. "I took the back way, through the park," he continued. "Shortcut to my place, quiet, peaceful. Only moonlight to guide me. But halfway through, something changed." "What changed?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the music. He tilted his head back, eyes narrowing. "I heard a sound, a hum. Faint at first. Then it got louder, and I could feel it right here." He tapped his chest. "Like a vibration, deep down." I shifted in my seat, the words sinking into me like the heavy bass line from the jukebox. "Then what?" Bill's gaze locked onto mine, unwavering. "Then I saw it. A ball of light, floating in the meadow. It wasn't solid. Not really. It was translucent, like jelly. It shifted colors. Glowing, blue, green. Colors I can't even describe. And the hum, it was coming from the ball." "What was it?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Bill shook his head. "No clue. It didn't act like anything I'd ever seen. It floated there, just above the grass, shifting and pulsing like it was alive. Hard to tell the size. 1 second it seemed small, like a baseball. Then it looked big, like a car. Didn't make sense." He lit a cigarette, the flame throwing brief, flickering shadows across his face. The bartender frowned but said nothing, his focus drifting to the jukebox. Bill took a drag and exhaled slowly, his voice growing quieter. "I wanted to run," he said, "but I couldn't. It was like it had me locked in place, watching it. And the hum, it wasn't just a sound anymore. It was in my head. That's when it happened." "What happened?" I asked, my hands gripping the edge of the bar. He leaned closer, his cigarette trembling between his fingers. "I heard words," he whispered, "but not out loud, not with my ears. It was in my mind, like thoughts that weren't mine. It said, 'Do not fear,' clear as day." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What did you do?" "Nothing," he said simply. "I couldn't. The ball of light started moving, drifting closer, but the hum changed. It felt like it was trying to say something, but I couldn't make sense of it. And then, just like that, it was gone. The hum, the light, everything was gone. It left me standing there, scared out of my wits." The jukebox hummed softly in the background, the blues riff fading into a haunting ballad. Bill stubbed out his cigarette and finished his ale in one last gulp before standing up. "Anyway," he he said, his voice gruff again. "That's my story. Believe it or don't. It don't make no difference to me." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me in the dark oasis of the Cheatin' Heart, alone with my beer and my thoughts. The story lingered, wrapping itself around me, like the shadows that clung to the bar. Bill might have been crazy, but he wasn't lying. Story number 5. The encounter at the schoolyard. When I was 9, something happened that I still can't explain. It was a warm spring afternoon, the kind of day when the sunlight bounced off the metal swings on the playground and filled the air with the smell of freshly cut grass. School had just lit out, and most of the kids had already run off home or onto the ball field. I stayed behind with a couple of friends, lingering by the fence that separated the playground from the meadow. The meadow was our favorite spot, an open stretch of grass bordered by tall oaks and maples, their branches casting shifting shadows on the ground. It was wild and untamed, the kind of place that made you feel like anything could happen. That day, I learned just how true that was. I was the first to hear it. A hum, faint and low, like a sound that was just on the edge of perception. It came from somewhere beyond the meadow, far off in the distance. At first I thought it was the buzzing of power lines, or maybe a plane passing overhead. But the sound didn't fade. It grew stronger, pulsing in the air, wrapping itself around me like an invisible thread. "Do you guys hear that?" I asked, glancing at my friends. Tommy, who was halfway up the fence trying to spot a hawk he swore he'd seen earlier, paused and cocked his head. "Hear what?" "That hum," I said. "It's weird." He listened for a moment, then shrugged. "I don't hear anything." But I did. And as the hum grew louder, I noticed something else. A light, faint and shimmering, hovering just above the far edge of the meadow. It was unlike any light I'd seen before, bluish and soft, as if it were alive. My stomach tightened as I watched it, the hum syncing with the beat of my heart. "There," I said. "Look at that." This time, Tommy saw it too. "What is that?" he muttered, dropping down from the fence. The other kids turned, their faces scrunching with confusion as they stared at the light. None of us said another word. We were rooted in place, unable to look away as the light grew brighter and closer. And then it came into view. It wasn't just a light. It was a craft, circular and impossibly sleek, with a surface that seemed to ripple like water under the sun. It floated above the grass, descending slowly, gracefully, until it came to rest in the center of the meadow. I remember the way the grass flattened beneath it, as if the earth itself was bowing down. The hum was all around us now, not just a sound, but a vibration in my chest, my head, my body. It wasn't like any noise I'd ever heard. It felt alive, like it was inside me somehow. And then something even stranger happened. A thought, not my own, bloomed in my mind. The words weren't spoken, they weren't even heard. Not in the traditional sense, but they were there, clear and undeniable. I looked around, half expecting one of my friends to have said them. But their faces were blank with shock, and I just knew that the words hadn't come from any of them. They had come from the craft. It didn't make any sense. How could something so massive, so alien, communicate without sound, without words? And yet I felt it again, the same calm reassurance whispering through my thoughts. "We mean no harm." Tommy broke the silence, his voice trembling. "What do we do?" Nobody answered. I wanted to run, to hide, to get as far away from that thing as possible, but my legs wouldn't listen. I felt rooted to the ground, my gaze locked on the craft as it pulsed with faint light. It was mesmerizing, almost beautiful in a way I couldn't put into words. The hum changed, rising in pitch and intensity, and for a moment I thought it was going to take off, but it stayed where it was, hovering just a foot off the ground, its surface shimmering with strange patterns. And then, for the briefest moment, I thought I saw something, a ripple of shadow across its surface, but there was nothing there. "This place is safe," the thought came again. "We are only observing." I didn't know what to make of it. Were those my own thoughts, twisted by fear and imagination? Or was the craft actually speaking to me in some way I didn't understand? All I knew was that it felt real, too real to ignore. The others must have felt it too. Sarah, the oldest of us, took a shaky step forward, her hand outstretched like she was about to touch the thing. But as soon as she moved, the hum shifted, again, deeper this time, vibrating so powerfully that we all stumbled back. It wasn't angry, exactly, but it was firm, like a warning. We froze, holding our breath, as the craft began to rise. Slowly, steadily, it ascended into the sky, the hum fading with every inch of distance it gained. The lights along its surface dimmed, and then, in a blink, it was gone, vanished into the clouds, leaving nothing behind but the flattened grass and the weight of what had just happened. None of us moved. We just stared at the spot where the craft had been, our minds racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "Do we tell someone?" she asked. We all looked at each other, unsure. Who would believe us? We didn't even believe ourselves. In the end, we decided not to say anything. The only evidence was a strange circle in the grass, and that faded within a few days. But the memory didn't. It stayed with us, vivid and unshakable, a reminder of something none of us could explain. Even now, decades later, I can still hear the hum. I can feel the thoughts that weren't my own. And though I've tried to rationalize it, tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, I know what I saw. And no matter how much time passes, I'll never forget the feeling that, for a moment, something far beyond this world had come to our little meadow. Well, that wraps up tonight's collection of spooky UFO stories. Until next time, good night.